Q&A box versus the chat box. Please put them in the Q&A box, okay? So that way we will be watching for those and look to bring those questions forward as well. So before I turn it over to Sheila to make her introduction, I want to make a personal statement of gratitude to Brigadier General Best. Ma'am, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. I know we've tried for many years to get you on, and we're so happy that we've been successful and been able to get you here. We know it's not easy for you to find time to do these kinds of things with all the stuff that you're doing. So when you are able to make this kind of effort and carve out a little time for us, it does not go unnoticed at all. We are so grateful to have you with us this evening. Thank you very much personally and on behalf of the Eagle Group. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sheila to introduce you.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm Sheila Jessen. I'm the military recruiter for Cargill. And prior to that, I had served in the Minnesota National Guard from 2000 to 2012. So I known General Best back since she was a captain or a major, I guess. And so I'm really honored to have you with us tonight, ma'am. And I'm going to do a little introduction for everybody. So Brigadier General Sandy Best has served in the Minnesota National Guard for over 35 years. She has held a number of command positions, including a wartime rotation to Afghanistan. General Best serves as a special assistant to the Chief National Guard Bureau for Diversity. She advises and assists leaders across the 54 states and territories in institutionalizing diversity and inclusion in order to attract, recruit, and retain a quality, inclusive, and equitable workforce that reflects the communities the National Guard serves. General Best performs an additional state duty with the Minnesota National Guard as a Deputy Adjutant General, where she is responsible for providing guidance, leadership, support, and oversight to the Minnesota Department of Military Affairs. General Best is passionate about equality, diversity, and inclusion for all. She finds nothing more rewarding than helping others achieve their dreams. She is extremely proud to serve in the Minnesota National Guard, where members are encouraged to be their authentic self in an inclusive environment where they work hard to accomplish the mission and put people first. Thank you, General Best. Welcome.
Well, thank you all very much. I want to start out by acknowledging Adam. I really appreciate the warm welcome, but also Bob and Sheila, thanks for all your support in getting me here today. It's been a busy few years with me taking on this national position, but I do want to start out by saying how important the work that Eagles Group is doing for transitioning veterans. And that is not lost on me. I want you to know that. I know because at many junctures in my career, I thought that I would be transitioning, and I know how all the emotions that are associated with that. And it's groups like Eagles Group and the people that are associated with it, and all the connections to Yellow Ribbon corporate sponsors and partners with the Minnesota National Guard that really help people successful. So I think it's really important. And before I get into what I'm going to be talking about, I also wanted to give a shout out on the career track. I'm going to talk about this later when I talk about my thoughts on transitioning, but Alan Hill actually worked with my husband years ago as a vet rep with DEED, and that meeting really catapulted my husband into his next very successful career. So shout out to Alan Hill ahead of time, but I'll try and come back and share that story with you later. And then that Experience 2020 sounds amazing. And your next speaker, I am going to do my best to participate in that because Hakeem and that career navigation and the book that he wrote sounds really very interesting. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is, and this was really kind of prompted, so if there's other things that you want to know, please ask questions. But my agenda is really kind of sharing a little bit about my journey, my roles, diversity in the military, what's happening in the Minnesota National Guard, and then my thoughts on transitioning. And while we've allotted time at the end for questions, please ask questions as we go along, and we'll incorporate them into whatever we're talking about. It's more informal, the way I planned to kind of walk through these. So please, it's a discussion, and I welcome you engaging me. So first, starting out just my journey, I'm coming up on, I guess it's 37 years in the military, all Minnesota Air National Guard, but the last 10 plus years working at our Joint Force headquarters, 7 years enlisted, where my enlisted background was in the personnel area. And I've served in a whole variety of different positions that led me to where I'm at, but a real big focus on personnel and logistics, government relations. I was a squadron level commander in the logistics readiness squadron, a mission support group commander. I've served 6 different tags in my career that I've worked really directly for at different points. So that's just kind of a brief recap of me going from an airman, where Sheila is such an exceptional recruiter. She didn't recruit me. However, that recruiter relationship, whether you're joining the military or an organization, such a special one. I know that Sheila kept pictures of every person that she recruited into the military. And then when she retired, she started giving those pictures back to individuals. And it was really a joy to see how many lives she touched and impacted. But that's where my journey started, certainly was my recruiter. To this day, my recruiter's deceased, but his wife is still alive, and keep in touch with her on a quarterly basis. That was Bob Clevin, if there's any Air National Guard members that go back that far. And then really leading first enlisted, I think being enlisted, of course, makes you a better officer, because the enlisted corps is the backbone of the military and the tip of the spear. And so then was commissioned and served again squadron group, and then as the chief of staff of the Minnesota Air National Guard. And then I moved into the Deputy Adjutant General under General Jensen, who is now the director of the Army National Guard. And just recently, we have a new Adjutant General, Major General Sean Mankey. And I'm continue to serve as the Deputy Adjutant General. And that's a recap of my career. And I still want to talk a little bit more about that journey, because especially when you look back, you can reflect on sponsorship, mentorship, and coaching. And we're continuing to have these conversations over and over. But I do want to talk about those 3 really important parts of people's career progression. And that's whether you're in the military or corporate setting or transitioning. Sponsorship is really those power brokers, the influencers in organization that give individuals access to power, help open doors, really help catapult their future. And when I look back at my career at all different junctures, certainly it involves sponsors, even when I didn't know that's what it was. So I think now in the position that I'm in, and for everybody online, we all have access, or we can have access. It's helping other individuals with sponsorship and getting them known and opening doors to help provide them opportunities. The mentorship, mentorship and coaching, I think a lot of times people use those simultaneously. I know that I did. And so just recently, because we're having conversations on sponsorship, mentorship, and coaching at the national level, that is really an area that helps people thrive and move up in organizations and achieve their passion and their goals. But how I differentiate mentorship and coaching. Mentorship is when you're doing something like what I'm doing right now, sharing my career progression and how I got where I'm at. to allow and permit people to know that it's possible. So in the Minnesota National Guard, I do think as women have moved into top positions in the Minnesota National Guard, right now we have 3 female general officers. That really has shown people that it's possible. And so when people ask you to tell your story and how you got there, I think that's part of mentorship, that it's possible. Coaching is that it doesn't have to be the same way. How I got to that position in the Minnesota National Guard is different from both of the other female officers that I serve with. And so coaching is really helping individuals come into their own by different paths and different journeys. Really important. And I think coaching is probably, all 3 of these are important. And you can have many mentors and you can learn from each of them, but certainly sponsorship, mentorship, coaching, a really big part of my career. Then I wanted to just talk a moment on the role that the family and your peers and your supporters play in your success. Nobody gets where they're at on their own. And so really, I truly believe my success is because of the people who were pushing below, pulling from above, coaching me alongside. I call it my tribe or my network. And it is really important, in addition to your career aspirations, to ensure a balance of life and recognizing your family and those supporters, your friends that help support your family while you're doing some of the things that you're doing that take you away from your family. And then finally, on my journey, what I want to share is that I think the greatest responsibility that I have now is growing future leaders, being that sponsor, mentor, and coaching them to be able to thrive and achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. And there's no greater joy for me than when I hear or see people attain those and the changes that it brings about in their life. So I'm going to stop for a moment before I move into the next segment and see if there are any questions.
There's none right now, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Then I'm going to move on into my roles. We've already talked a little bit about my full-time position is I am the Deputy Adjutant General. And so I really, on the full-time side, have oversight of our 2 Minnesota Air National Guard wings, the 133rd Airlift Wing and the one here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, flying C-130s. And then the 148th Fighter Wing in Duluth, Minnesota, flying F-16s. And then I also really serve at the pleasure of the Adjutant General and perform any additional duties that he asks of me. One of the top duties in that area, of course, because of my passion with diversity and inclusion, I think that's a significant role I play in the Minnesota National Guard. And then I also am active in the Minnesota National Guard's COVID-19 response, along with many individuals, but I'll share that more of that with you later. So that's my full-time position. My national position, which is really my military position at this point, is called the Special Assistant to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau on Diversity and Inclusion. And that is a 2-year assignment. And in March, I will complete my 2 years in that position. And so don't know what will follow that, but that has been a busy 2 years on the national level. So working, those of you who are not familiar with the Minnesota National Guard, the chief of the National Guard Bureau is a 4-star general that serves on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and represents the National Guard as a service component along with all the other service components. And so really it is helping to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the 54 states, territories, and District of Columbia. And that is a significant role right now, where it's a little bit more than a part-time position. I serve roughly 140 days of the year in that position. I was pretty active in the Washington region up until March this past year. I've been back to Washington one time since COVID has hit, and a lot of those duties right now are being done virtually in the new space that we're all operating in. I'll talk a little bit more about diversity later on, but that's my second role. My third role, I also want to just mention this, that we have what we call special emphasis programs. There are affinity groups similar to employee networks in corporate America. And each of our special emphasis councils has an executive champion. And I am the executive champion for the African American Heritage Council. And again, I took on that role. I used to be the executive champion for the Women's Council, but right around the beginning of this year, I took on that new role as the executive champion. Of course, COVID-19 kind of put a little bit of slowdown on our diversity initiatives for a period of time. However, we are back in the saddle and lots to share in that area for anybody who's interested. For example, today we were in Stillwater, Minnesota, and we re-commemorated at the cemetery in Stillwater the headstone for James Carter, who was a slave during Civil War in the Wisconsin, Minnesota area, but eventually came to Stillwater, Minnesota, where he followed the military on a lot of excursions. He was never actually a military man, but he dressed in military clothing and provided invaluable support to the Stillwater Armory. And he had been buried in the cemetery, but did not have a headstone. And so today we re-commemorated him, James Carter, and his wife, Anna, with a headstone. And it was a really special event where we had a large number of Stillwater Armory Joint Force Headquarters and the African American Heritage Council there to support that event. And then finally, just to share with you, another important role in my life is being a wife to my husband, who I've been married to over coming up on 33 years, a mom to 4 daughters, and that is a really important dimension and helps make me who I am. So I'll stop there. That was my second item. See if there's any questions.
Ma'am, there was a question in the chat. They were talking about they like the differentiation between the mentoring and the sponsorship, and wondering about what the differences and expectations for those two. If you could talk more about that.
Sure. Between sponsorship and mentorship.
Correct.
Yes. I think sponsorship is when, as a senior leader in the organization, when we have open positions and we don't have any diverse candidates, that leaders in our organization are asking questions and identifying who could be candidates for these positions, and then opening those doors for people. For me, that sponsorship looked like, and I didn't really know they were doing it, but when people tap you on the shoulder to do something that you feel is so far out of your comfort zone, but they help you see that you can and should consider that. That's to me what sponsorship is: opening doors, pushing people in directions that, for example, to become a general officer, I had to have command at all those different levels. Had somebody that wasn't my sponsor not helped ensure that I got those command opportunities, I, would not have had an opportunity to be a general officer. So sponsorship is those people that are really looking out for the careers of the people that they serve with them and creating equitable situations, that it's not just your friends that you're looking at, that everybody has the opportunity to be considered for those kind of situations. Mentorship is directly with those individuals. Sponsorship sometimes is working with the rest of the organization to ensure you're looking at it, not necessarily with that individual themselves. Where the mentorship comes in is when you're working directly with the individuals to help them believe in themselves. I want to share with you the book Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In has a statement in there, some information in one of the chapters that talks about women and men applying for positions, where men, as soon as they've mastered 70% of the job, they feel as though they're ready for their next opportunity. Where women have a tendency to not lean in, to think that they have to master 100% of the job before they pursue another opportunity. And one of my sponsors and mentors, I think you can serve as both a sponsor and a mentor. So the person that helped me understand that, because when people tap you on the shoulder and get you to think something, your comfort zone is to stay in what you know and not necessarily take on new challenges. And that mentorship relationship is what helps build your confidence and allows you to do that or to consider it. And coaching is really helping the individual doing it with their own unique style, not the way their mentor did it, but with their own flair. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, ma'am. I have another question from someone Kristen Von Eschen is online. Yep. And she says, that what is your suggestion for keeping a healthy work-life balance? She said, you make it look so easy and you're invested in so many people's lives. What are some of your tips and techniques to balance home and work commitments?
Yeah, great question. And certainly, Chief Master Sergeant Kristen Von Eschen and I have spent a lot of our career together, as I have with you, Sheila. And so I learn as much from her. So we're mentee mentors to one another. And I would say that just like her, it's never easy. And when you're raising children, that it is shifting gears and making time and going home at the end of the day and just realizing you can only do so much. And when work has to be your priority, but you also know to be able to ensure your family is going to be there when you're done with that work, you've got to make time and carve it out. So I like that big rocks principle that you just have to make sure you build it into your calendar. And so I do think those relationships, and they do get strained from time to time. Like my sister and I have not gotten together for quite a while. So that's a sacrifice right now that hangs in the back of my mind. But I really do make sure that I leave work at a reasonable hour. If I have to plug back into work, I try to do it later at night, perhaps when my family's gone to bed. Not easy. I think it is also sharing those stories with other people, commiserating a little bit, but just recognizing you'll never be perfect. You do the best you can in all dimensions. Okay. Any other question? Otherwise, I'll move on. The next area that I wanted to talk about is diversity in the military. And the Minnesota National Guard is really doing some exciting things. We're not perfect. We've got always areas for improvement, but for the last 10 years, we've put a really big focus on diversity and inclusion. The National Guard has a strategic plan that we've really developed. We've adopted it as our own in the Minnesota National Guard. And I'm going to kind of walk through the goals, and I'm going to share with you some of Minnesota National Guard's diversity and inclusion best practices. And the first goal for the National Guard's strategic plan is enhance diversity and inclusion in all states, territories, and the District of Columbia. That's part of my national role as well as my state role, but we do it with these special emphasis councils, and we have 8 of them. It includes the Minnesota National Guard, we call them affinity councils. Number 1 is American Indian Native American Heritage Council. Number 2, African American Heritage Council. Number 3, Asian American Pacific Islander Council. Number 4, Hispanic and Latino Heritage Council. Number 5, LGBT Council. Number 6, Women's Council. Number 7, Disability Council. And number 8, the Holocaust Remembrance Council. And those councils are really the keys to the success of the inclusion efforts within the Minnesota National Guard. And they connect us to the communities that we serve. And we use them to strategically affect how we engage with communities to be able to recruit and retain top talent in our organization. Each of those councils has an executive champion, which is a senior leader in our organization. And then they all have a manager and then also advisor. They have an advisor and sometimes co-managers. And we've really made a big impact ensuring that these are the participants include Army and Air, men and women, officer and enlisted. The Minnesota National Guard continues to strive for inclusion. And so part of our campaign, or the way we do this, is dependent on our leaders creating a climate within our organization that enables our service members to maximize their performance. And part of that, we've adopted a people first campaign focus, and some of that includes our social media campaign that has telling the stories about our service members in all these different areas. And our National Guard strategic advantage is that we live here, we work here, and we serve here. Let's see, Army recruiting. The Army has done a tremendous job over the last 10 years to help us. They have a target of trying to recruit 20% racial and ethnic diversity each year and 20% gender for their enlistments. And they have knocked it out of the park. They're probably closer to 30% on how they do that. They've also done some really neat strategies with a Who's Who magazine, which kind of shows soldiers and their military and their civilian environments to help recruit more. And of course, that represents diverse members across our formation. The Air National Guard recruiting is not left behind. We don't have as many opportunities to recruit because the Army does have significantly greater turnover. We have better retention in the Air National Guard, but that means there's less opportunity to recruit higher volumes. But we have been working hard to do the same thing that the Army National Guard is doing to be represented in our communities to diversify our force. We also have a rookie ranks program where all of our new folks are teamed with buddies to help their immersion into the National Guard. We pay attention to those demographics. So I did want to share with you, 10 years ago in 2010, our diversity, minorities in the Minnesota National Guard collectively was 7.4%. And 10 years later, it's slow progress when you're measuring it 1 year at a time. But over 10 years, we have increased our diversity in the Minnesota National Guard to 19%. And we have seen significant increase in the diversity in our junior ranks, but we also are paying, so in our junior ranks, it's like 23.9%, but we also track and are paying close attention to growing our junior leaders into mid-level leaders and ultimately senior leaders, which is how Congress is going to measure the success of the service components in the National Guard. And then one of our more recent strategic partners has been a magazine here in Minnesota called Lavender Magazine. And they have been running periodic military diversity and inclusion articles on our soldiers and airmen to help with our recruitment and retention. The CEO and president of Lavender Magazine, his name is Stephen Rockford. If you're ever looking for a speaker, I would be happy to put you in touch with him. That would be a really great connection when you're helping transitioning veterans to be able to advertise in their magazine too for EGOS Group. So something to consider. Our second goal is to ensure leaders at all levels champion diversity programs and priorities and understand what is required to achieve success. I say that the number one most important thing in that category is that the Adjutant General is committed to it and that he puts resources. So like the quality and safety movement, I believe diversity and inclusion is to have cultural change. It has to be part of your DNA, and you need everybody in your organization committed to it. So some of the ways that we do it is ensuring that we have senior, mid-level, and junior individuals at events. Like the event that we did today had senior, mid-level, and junior leaders, because you're helping mentor and showing them how to do this kind of community engagement. There's a whole host of ways, but because I'm passionate, I could talk about this all day long. I'm just going to highlight some of those big things like I have already shared with you. One of the other areas that I think is really critical in this area is we have a junior officer enlisted TAG advisory council where we have 22 officers and enlisted members from our major subordinate commands, airmen and soldiers that have direct access to our top enlisted leaders who run this council with the Adjutant General. And they come up with the barriers in our organization and the things that need to change to keep them there in the future. And this last year, they developed white papers, and I'll share with you one of them was with our fitness standards and the demands that are being placed on, especially in the Army with their changing fitness program. The recommendation that is that we look at some kind of a nutritionist or some kind of expertise in the Minnesota National Guard. So that has resulted in a TAG appointed task force to commit resources and to really get after looking at that kind of a program, both for the Army and the Air. The third goal is to develop and increase diversity partnerships, both external and internal to the National Guard. And we do that again through those councils and have a variety. Every council has kind of anchor events. I'll be talking soon about our Women's Leadership Forum, which is one of our biggest anchor events and has been a game changer for the Minnesota National Guard. But really those engagements are what helps make us successful, and those special emphasis councils help us do that. The final goal is develop, mentor, and retain diverse talent reflective of the communities that the National Guard serves. It is critical that soldiers and civilians continue to learn about potential opportunities to advance along the path that leads to the highest positions in the organization. And so I mentioned our Women's Leadership Forum. It is an anchor event for us, and it is part of the pride of the Minnesota National Guard. In 2020, we held our 7th Women's Leadership Forum. Most of them have been in person because of COVID-19. We needed to be creative, and we did it virtually. A shout out to Cargill, who was our sponsor for that event. We try to rotate that. Other people who have sponsored it include Boston Scientific, Best Buy, 3M, Metropolitan State University, and we had a panel of veterans from Cargill who shared their story and challenges and how they see that transition. That was one of our speakers. We also had Dr. Denise E. Williams. She is a professor at Metropolitan State University, and she shared her passion on how to get ahead and the criteria. She called them dewdrops, which was recommendations on that she shared what she's learned through her career. And then finally, we had a speaker. We had a variety of other speakers in these two, but the highlights were Dr. Dew, the Cargill panel, and then Pauline Koo, who talked also about some examples that she's experienced. And she runs a consulting firm, but has worked for a variety of large companies. And so she shared her expertise too. This event has grown to be an event about 350 people, and it supports officers, enlisted, men, women, Army, and Air. We used to have it focused more on women. Like, we always felt if somebody was coming to it, they were taking somebody else's place. But we know women do not succeed without the support of their male counterparts. And so right now the ratio for that event is probably 60% women and 40% men, and highly successful, and as was this year. I'm gonna stop on diversity right there and see if there's any questions.
Yes, ma'am. We have one question. What are you doing to help transitioning veterans, and how can Eagle Group help you?
That is fantastic. What we're doing is we have our Director of Military Outreach, Annette Kuiper, and she usually is the POC to help link veterans to companies, where our yellow ribbon companies is our starting point for focusing on that. And we use our veterans network in these organizations to link individuals to be able to get at least exposure when we know it. I think that Eagle Group is a strategic partner of ours, because as veterans leave the Minnesota National Guard, we like to give them every possible opportunity they can. I know that you're working hard to increase women, but I would also say the focus is even greater than women. It is all of our diverse population, to help with transitioning, to ensure those individuals are set up for success. One individual, and I don't know if she was able to join us, but I had hoped that Senior Master Sergeant Michelle Hogan, who retired from the Minnesota National Guard this past weekend, that she would be a really great person to help work with Eagle Group and link to how we can do this partnership better. Because one, she is a transitioning veteran. She's recently been associated. She's a senior NCO, along with Chief Von Eschen. Those are drivers, at least at the 133rd. And we can also link up with Army National Guard representatives to help in that area as well.
Well, I think that keeping your part-time soldiers and airmen fully employed in the civilian sector helps with your retention, right? So it's really a national security effort to make sure that they're getting the support they need to be successful so they can have a dual career path with civilian employment and National Guard.
Absolutely.
I do have another question. So the active duty Air Force Officers Corps lags significantly behind the enlisted force in terms of diversity. Are there any initiatives that you have had success with for increasing diversity in officer accessions that might be transferable to Air Force ROTC?
That is really a great question. I cannot say specifically that that is our greatest area of improvement. I think that on the national level that we are working to look at metrics, and we have to peel those back at the lowest level. And officer accessions is an area, you know, the Secretary of Defense has pulled together a board, as has the United States Air Force, called the Diversity and Inclusion Board, and the Department of the Army has a board that's called Project Inclusion. All of them right now are pulling together work, and the report will be due out, but there is going to be some significant change to help remove barriers that can help us grow our membership in officer accessions. And so some of them are targeted at the academies and how they're looking at that. We have seen really big transitions. One thing as it relates to ROTC is that I think both the Army and the Air would benefit from having a junior ROTC program that could be a feeder for these other ROTC programs in Minneapolis, for example.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question from the audience. Is it the case that there are a separate group or emphasis in the National Guard for everyone, with the exception of non-Hispanic heterosexual men? Is that correct? What is the plan to diversify the range of groups for a full range of inclusion?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So it sounds like the question is kind of focusing on that you have a affinity group for everyone except for non-Hispanic heterosexual men. So basically the white guys. And I wonder about that too. Like you think, well, if we're doing so much effort on the diversity and inclusion, that are they being left behind, right? And how do we make it equal?
I think that's a great question. And I would say that all of our affinity groups, although they're a focus to be able to give more recognitions to underrepresented individuals in our organization, that this is equity for all, not just those individuals. And so when I personally am mentoring, I'm not mentoring with the exclusion of the majority of our population. They are totally included in that inclusion efforts. So all of those groups, as I said, even the Women's Leadership Forum, we call it Women's Leadership Forum. However, leadership really, it applies to men and women. And the men benefit from our Women's Leadership Forum as much as the women do. And like I said, it is an inclusive initiative. At some point, when we attain parity and equity, there's no reason that we couldn't call that a leadership council, for example. So I hope that addresses it, but all of these initiatives are not at the cost. Nobody has to lose. It is really more at making it equitable for all. And that because the top positions have historically been held by the majority, and that sometimes there are barriers that prevent underrepresented groups from achieving those and opening doors. Now we have a focus to try and just ensure there's equity for all, not at the exclusion.
Thank you, ma'am. And this is really the Minnesota National Guard. And you have been leading the way for a lot of other states to follow. And I know you have other states that are looking to you as a guide.
Yes, we do. And that's part of that national role. But just recently we had New Mexico and Nevada have followed suit, where we have a director of diversity and inclusion. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Suarez is the current person. Before him, it was Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Merricks. But their program has gotten national attention. So routinely we have people come to Minnesota to just try and replicate or share best practices. We still have room for improvement. Not trying to say that we're the experts, but we certainly have put deliberate intention into it. If I could shift gears, I would like to just share a little bit about some of the other things that are happening in the Minnesota National Guard. Of course, the COVID-19 has driven historic support to our state, where typically the state active duty support that we provide our state is for hurricanes, or not for hurricane, but floods, fire, civil disturbance, and so forth. The time periods that people are on state active duty are, 2 to no more than 4 weeks for the most part. With COVID-19, we have been at this since probably May, and serving in a wide variety of roles, to include swabbing at long-term care facilities, helping devise plans for alternate care facilities should our hospitals reach maximum capacity, and then providing surge testing logistics support across the state at 6 locations, currently 4. In the future, because as most of you are tracking, COVID-19 numbers are very concerning, and the spread is so great right now with even small gatherings, that the National Guard may be supporting up to 11 sites to help with testing of college students and other things that will be released by the governor's office, but 11 sites there. And then we also are providing urgent staffing care support to long-term care facilities right now. In addition to that, we have been involved in the civil disturbance call-up, and that certainly is also driving a lot of the national conversation on diversity and inclusion, and the necessity to ensure we are getting after systemic barriers in not only the military, but across the nation. And then other things that are going on in the Minnesota National Guard with COVID-19 is really developing opportunities like what we're doing tonight in a virtual environment, to ensure that we continue to have a ready force both for the Air and the Army National Guard. And then another thing that you have already talked about in your 3 pillars for the Eagles group is ensuring that we are looking out for our airmen and soldiers and civilian employees in this COVID-19, which we've got so many people who are working remotely. And so just ensuring that we continuously look at ways that we can have touch points with our soldiers and airmen. I'll stop and see if there are any questions, and maybe get a time hack from you too, Sheila, on how much more time you would like me to go.
Yes, ma'am. It's 7 p.m. We usually go until, 7:20 or so. So if you want another 15 or 20 minutes, we have time for that. Another question we have here, you mentioned that the Guard helps to develop, mentor, and retain talent. People transitioning out of the military at different points in their life journey, however. And so at ETS, mentoring relationships may end. Is there any after service opportunities or programs for soldiers still needing mentoring that you're aware of?
That is that's a great question and an important aspect, because we know that people define themselves by their service in the military. And when you get close to transitioning, it is an incredibly scary time, because we don't always know how to transfer those skills and how to communicate in a different language to what we know with our acronyms in the military. And so one of the programs that Minnesota National Guard instituted with Blue Cross Blue Shield was one of their top leaders who had come from active duty knew that access is what helps veterans be able to continue their service beyond the military, and that sometimes military people have to start at a lower level in an organization because they don't always have that access or can't articulate their skill sets. And so we developed a kind of a mentorship coaching program. It was 2-tiered. It was transitioning vets, where we had a limited number. I think it was 10 transitioning vets that had mentors through Blue Cross Blue Shield. We met at a variety of different dates where we'd all come together, and then they'd have one-on-one times, and then some things that they did with their mentors individually. And then we had a second tier, which was just really mid-level individuals in our organization that had the ability to be able to give leaders at Blue Cross Blue Shield more knowledge of what their Minnesota National Guard does. But it also helped give mid-level leaders some exposure to corporate America to help them think more longer term what they might want to do someday in their future. So that's one example of something that we have started to do. We do have programs, but sometimes they're stronger for example, AGRs. And so definitely an area that we can improve on, which does lead me to my thoughts on transitioning, which was the final area that I was going to talk about. And I'll talk about it from a personal level a little bit. And I will share, when I came to my last Eagle Group meeting, the speaker was the author of the 20-minute info interview. And I thought that was such an impactful, went out, bought my own book, bought one for my daughter and several of her friends and other people that I knew that were transitioning, because it is a very scary time every time that I've thought I was transitioning. And some of my thoughts on that are, first, when you're in the military, you think very broad, because the military trains us to do whatever they ask us to do. So I would always be thinking, well, tell me what you've got and I'll tell you, if I can do it. I'll tell you how I can do it, because that's really what we've been doing the majority of our military career, is thinking broad. Or they ask us to do COVID-19 response, civil disturbance response, flood response, new jobs, new locations. So I think it is really, and I'm sure that you're doing some of this, but I think that is an area that we really need help with, is to take that broad perspective and narrow it to what are those, your elevator pitch and the things that you should be pursuing. Help people really get more clarity on that. At least that's what I discovered for myself. And then I know you guys have had and have experts within your community on that resume, because the resume is constantly changing and the value of it constantly changes. I think helping military members be able to articulate their skill set on their resume and verbally, and in how you engage in that is very critical to the next step, service beyond the military. I think another area is developing confidence. And I want to talk for a moment on this. I want to double back to Alan Hill when he worked for DEED. And my husband had been unemployed for a year and a half, and very, very, very frustrated with, you know, sending out resumes, not getting interviews, really how you go about a career search. And I totally recall Alan's coaching of him significantly changed, and he got the very next job that he interviewed for. And I 100% attribute it to Alan Hill's coaching, because one, I asked him to use the DEED resource, because that's where we were referring our soldiers and airmen, is through DEED at the workforce centers and vet reps. That's one area. We also use our corporate partners, and we also use Ego Group. And there's probably more resources that I'm not speaking to, that I just don't even know all those resources. But Alan Hill, the strategy that he shared with my husband was to not interview like you want the job, to interview like you have the job. And it was a game changer. And thank you, Alan Hill, to this day, for your contribution to that. I'll stop and see if there's questions.
Yes, ma'am. We do have another question here. So suicide has not been in the news for some time. What is the Guard doing for vulnerable people, especially during COVID-19 and social isolation?
We continue to have a task force that is committed to that. I am not the person that is focusing on that. Not that it doesn't remain a constant priority to us, but some of the things that we continue to do, especially on the Minnesota Air National Guard, is stand downs, resiliency stand downs. We have increased the number of virtual events that we're doing and reaching out to our folks to be able to have conversations and make sure that when possible, we are bringing them in person to different events too. So on my direct staff, I have, I'll say at least 40% of my team is working remotely. And those individuals, we just encourage them periodically to make reasons to come to visit or attend a meeting in person, wearing masks, socially distanced, limited, and so forth. But those are some of the things that we continue to do to just have conversations, engaging in bold conversations. We also, associated with the suicide prevention, we've taken on a very big initiative in the Minnesota National Guard to get after sexual assault prevention. And then also to review what we've done well and what we have not done well in that area. And so under our former TAG, General Jensen initiated a real robust assessment of the Minnesota National Guard, Army and Air to look at those issues. We invited victims to participate, to tell their story. It's made some huge change to the way we're doing a variety of things. The military at large has invested in resources that are targeted at prevention first, but the other areas are believing our victims and having a deliberate process to ensure that we're reviewing those and following them from as long as they need to be followed, as long as the victim needs help and support. Are you there?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. And
Those-
Alan Hill says that his wife is very proud of him now.
That's great. He must have helped her get a job too.
He helps everybody. Yeah.
Well, that is all I really had planned to talk about and share. So I'll see if anybody else has questions or comments.
Hi, this is Bob. I have a question, and since I'm kind of driving this, it won't allow me to ask a question in the Q&A box, so I'll ask you here. So bringing this home for the veterans in transition and all the panels and task force that you talked about here and all that's going on, and with your NGB hat on, let's say a veteran is looking for a job and everything else being equal, that person is competent and has all the education and experience. What is it about diversity and inclusion can make that person shine and their experience in the National Guard? What about it? I mean, can you help bring that out?
I think that soft skills are important now more than ever. And certainly I think that we thrive in that. Excuse me. Excuse me 1 minute. I had an interrupter.
It's okay.
I'm back. I think soft skills are important leadership skills, and I think that differentiates individual. I think you can do your technical jobs really, really well, but what makes people shine is how they treat other people, how they engage in relationships internally, externally, at all levels of the organization. And so I think everything we're talking about with diversity and inclusion, with resiliency, the bottom line is respect and how you treat others. That's at least my perspective on it.
I'm trying to give people in transition some good sound bites to use if they're ever asked. So thank you.
Well, this is Sheila. I just would add that I think as a military member or a veteran applying for a position, you're coming from an organization that has a very diverse workforce. So that's a selling point. You know, you're saying, hey, I am used to working in a very diverse workforce and I've been successful in that. And employers want to hear that too, because they want a diverse workforce. And since you've already been thriving in there, that's helpful.
Well, and of course, military people make great employees. I mean, most companies are tapping our military network because they come with leadership skills. They're drug-free. They have learned not only skill sets, but led people, developed people, project management. The reason the state is using us so much for logistics, I mean, I think of our 13,000 soldiers and airmen, all military people learn how to solve problems and think creatively and innovate. So those are all additional qualities that I think military service helps put a high value on your service beyond service.
General Best, this is Adam speaking, and I've got a question for you. I've really enjoyed listening to you speak this evening, and when we talk about diversity in a lot of ways, you've certainly done quite a few diverse things in your career. So the question I have for you is going to step back for a second. When you take a look and you think about all the roles that you have held, whether it's been wife, mother, an enlisted person in the National Guard, an officer in the National Guard, now someone who's in the general ranks, working on the diversity side of things, being in command in multiple occasions. If you were to really step back and try to boil it down to like maybe one thing or one statement that really has kind of helped you be successful across the board with everything that you've done, what would you say that is?
That's a really great question, Adam. I would say that being able to adapt to changing environments is an important skill set. And I say that because what made me successful at the 133rd Airlift Wing, if I would have applied all the same principles when I came to Joint Force Headquarters working in a predominantly Army environment, that would have not set me up for success. So being able to really, and that's in my family environment too, you have to adapt to the changing requirements of whatever you're working in. So I think being adaptable is one. I think getting to yes is another important thing, like every time you're tapped on your shoulder, I have initially tried to get out of it. Sometimes because I didn't believe and trust in myself. But I think my advice to anybody is when you're tapped on the shoulder to do something, as much as your body tells you resist it, try to get to yes, unless of course it's unethical, illegal, or immoral, or doesn't fit your value system. Being true to yourself. I know that's more than one. I don't think there's one. I think all of those are important. Like I have, as a female leader in the military, sometimes people think you should be a certain way. And I've really tried to remain true to who I am as a person, that I'm transparent and the same person, no matter what environment I'm in. But you really have to develop confidence in order to be able to do that. And you don't always have it. That's why your networking and your support are so important. So relationships matter. And I think how all of the people who support you is probably number one.
Well, no, that's great. I really appreciate that, ma'am. That's a great answer. And you covered a lot of really great things on that stuff here. I think that we hit all the time. And yeah, I couldn't help but kind of, laugh to myself a little bit, because I think amongst this crowd, we joke a lot that I don't think there's a single person that hasn't served that hasn't had a situation where it's like, well, for example, I think back to my time, like, hey, you're going to be I remember when people came to me and said like, hey, you're going to be you're going to be the motor transport officer. So, well, I don't know anything about motor transport. Congratulations. You're going to figure it out now. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it's like, how many times do we all get some kind of collateral duty that wasn't maybe part of the original job description, but they all come with it, and you got to figure out to adapt, like you said, and run with it. And it's really valuable to hear it from somebody at your level as well. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Adam and Bob and Sheila and everybody who joined us, Chief Von Eschen. And I also have Tech Sergeant Ryan Ringwelski, who is my executive assistant. And he is just doing amazing things and growing and going to be promoted to Master Sergeant on November 1st. And taking on a new role in the organization. So I want to give a shout out to him, because your success comes from all those people who contribute, and he's one of my main contributors. So thanks, Ryan, and everybody for allowing me to be a part of this. I do think veterans transitioning so important. I have been there. I know how it feels. I've helped lots of people during this period of time, and it's just plain scary. And it causes you to question your abilities and your capability. And that's where you need to be tenacious and persistent and believe in yourself and surround yourself with the people that continue to give you that good message when you don't believe in yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, ma'am. We are so grateful that we had the opportunity after all these years to get you to come and speak with us. You certainly did not disappoint in the slightest. We're very grateful for all the great information you shared with us this evening. And yes, Ryan, we want to congratulate you on your upcoming promotion. The general probably neglected to tell you that because you've done, it's been announced here on this, your wedding down now must include all of us. So we look forward to hopefully getting together and running up your bill for that wedding down very soon. So, but no, General Best, we're so grateful to have had you here this evening. Thank you so very much. We're very grateful for everything you've shared with us, and we appreciate you bringing in the personal side of it in addition to the professional side and everything you're doing to work with diversity for the National Guard right now, and your experience in command, and everything that all the steps that you've had in your journey. So we're so grateful. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And our new Adjutant General, Major General Sean Mankey,
Yes.
would be another extraordinary speaker at some future event.
Okay.
He's doing a fantastic job, and it's a real pleasure to work with him. He's an aviator that came from the Combat Aviation Brigade and was the aviation officer for the state. So, and was the chief of staff, was a general officer at our division, 34th Infantry Division, and now our adjutant general. So just another consideration for the future. Awesome.
No, that's great. We'd love to do that. We'd love to start getting him in the queue and see what we can do about having him come to speak with us. And I could see us maybe potentially tapping you on the shoulder, tapping you on the shoulder, ma'am, to see if you might be able to put in a good word for us or something. So, but
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, General Best. We're so grateful. Appreciate everyone being here this evening. As we get ready to close things out, I want to again ask and see if we have any landings that maybe we might have had here in the last month since our last meeting. Anybody that maybe has been on the lookout for a role and has landed a job. Anyone that we might be able to bring to the